Hello you beautiful misfits and welcome to the second of this year's E3 Pixelburn Blitzkriegs, covering the slightly rickety mess of technical issues and curious format changes that was the Sony Conference. Although in all fairness to them, at least they tried to do something a bit different this year. This year's Sony proceedings didn't take place in a big conference hall however, at least not to begin with. Instead, the assorted press and influencer attendees were all packed into a somewhat cramped looking recreation of a church hall, lit by strings of bulbs. The kind of church hall from which you and your brethren might make a last, desperate stand against the combined forces of the FBI and the ATF, quaffing poisoned flavour aid right as the M1A1 Abrams battle tanks come crashing through the walls. An impression not helped by a rather eager and excitable Sean Layden of Sony, seeming like he just couldn't wait to usher everybody up to the mothership.
Thank you for coming out. It's great to see the congregation as large as it is tonight.
Brothers and sisters, the day of ascension is nigh. Fortunately, this banjo-playing chap helped shift the tone somewhat, dialing things down from a wee bit apocalyptic to a more regular, small-town, we can't afford an organ, Sunday service kind of affair. I personally enjoyed this bit, it was nice and chill. Peeps in the audience and at home, however, were getting a bit antsy to see The Last of Us Part the Second, because what other game could be heralded by mournful, albeit relaxing, banjo-playing? The trailer proper began with Ellie consoling a forlorn male pal at a dance in a church hall illuminated by strings of light bulbs. Like the one everybody physically present at the Sony event watching this was seated in. My, what a twist, mind blown churchception. Anyhow, Ellie from the first game, now of legal drinking age, is doing the classic stand alone at a bar brooding routine when a bloke called Jesse rocks up. After a quip about Ellie's old man giving him a hard time for slacking off on zombie duty, which at least confirms Joel is still alive, Jesse laments about breaking up with his girlfriend Dina. Ellie tries to console him, but then Dina herself saunters up and invites Ellie to dance with her. After some flirtatious chit-chat culminating in some quite impressive kissing physics, we then segue into Ellie brutally puncturing a man's jugular with a knife. That might seem like a rather jarring hard cut to some quite excessive brutality, if we hadn't just seen Ellie literally crush a man's heart before his very eyes.
I give you guys 2 weeks until you're back together.
Brutality.
Anyhow, cue lots and lots of actual physical murder, not just emotional slaughter, starring Ellie, out on her Todd in a wilderness and methodically slaughtering a bunch of hostile people who all obviously picked their clothes from Urban Outfitters' post-apocalyptic religious cult range. There are arrows to the back, explosive arrows to the face, and other combat bits, culminating in one last ruckus in an abandoned store before we fade back to the previous tender church dance and kissing physics. Yeah, it was alright. Some more Last of Us, innit? Still, it whet my appetite for more, so bring on the rest of the games.
We're taking a quick intermission while folks move along to the next part of the experience. We'll have a little bit more to share on that later.
Oh. Okay. Not quite what I was expecting. And so all us spods watching at home on a live stream had to sit and wait while Sean Layden here chatted to a pair of PlayStation presenters, all gathered around the same table like a bunch of sports pundits doing a post-match discussion about a footy game.
Well, United were scarcely recognisable from the team we've known over the last couple of seasons. What's going on, do you feel?
The trick of winning the championship 2:15 when they get the team sheet by kids. The trick is always by kids. It's just going to give them a lift and it'll happen every time they play the kids.
Wait a minute. This is pre-show stuff. You're sneaking bits of the pre-show to the actual show. Huh. That's on my watch. Fuck's sake, I skipped the fucking pre-show segments for a reason, you know. Mostly because all they do is show us a bunch of trailers for stuff we already know about or have seen already. Like this trailer for COD Blops 3, or this one for Days Gone. There were also trailers for the rather charming looking Ghost Giant, a VR only title, and the rhythmtastic Beat Saber, another VR only title, along with this one for the new Destiny 2 expansion, Forsaken, in which Nathan Fillion's character, Cade 6, gets shot in the face and appears to be permanently irrevocably dead. Which at least saves Bungie some cash on the voice budget, assuming it isn't a ruse of course. Amongst this bevy of trailers, however, was one for a game that I must confess genuinely had me rather intrigued, Twin Mirror. A new game from Don't Nod, the developers of Life is Strange, who have clearly been very busy recently. The basic premise is you play a regular, seemingly unremarkable chap called Sam, who is not only in the middle of dealing with a heavy breakup, but also has to return to his hometown to attend the funeral of his best friend. Blimey. That's not so much life giving you lemons as life giving you an armful of lemons and then kicking you in the nuts so you drop them all. Anyway, Sam returns to his hometown only to wake up in his hotel room the very next morning with his shirt covered in blood and no memory of the previous night. Okay, so it's life giving you an armful of lemons then kicking you in the nuts so you drop them all into a bucket of anthrax. So you can't even make lemonade from them. Cue Sam having to piece together what happened in what's best described as looking like a pinch of that one good bit from Fahrenheit/Indigo Prophecy, along with a smidge of Alan Wake and Life is Strange, thrown into a cocktail of Silent Hill and Twin Peaks. Even 2 of those ingredients would be enough to pique my interest, so I'll be keeping an eye on this one. Eventually, enough time passed for the congregation to have been moved to a more traditional and spacious conference venue, where Sony would be presenting the 3 remaining big titles they'd previously stated would be the main focus for this event. So up next was Ghost of Tsushima, which, like The Last of Us Part 2, was preceded by a musician playing an instrument. The instrument in question being a bamboo flute called the shakuhachi, used by members of the Fuchs sect of Zen Buddhism in a practice called suizen, or blowing meditation. The person playing it meanwhile was one Cornelius Boots, a worldwide recognised master of the instrument in question. So I probably would have really enjoyed this performance, had Sony's Twitch stream not shat itself a mere 5 seconds into it. In hindsight, I could have popped over to YouTube's own stream, but that had around a minute or two's delay, and I like to absorb these conferences as they happen, goddammit. Whenever I watch them live at least. Eventually I'd hammered the F5 key enough times to bring the stream back online because I'm great like that, just in time to catch up with our protagonist on day 9 of the Mongol invasion of Japan. Presumably the first one, which went pretty well for the Mongols until, worried about being stranded on the Japanese mainland by a typhoon, they temporarily retreated to their ships, which all got annihilated by the aforementioned typhoon. The second invasion made it as far as the seawalls of Kyushu before also getting completely annihilated by a typhoon. From which of course we get perhaps one of Kublai Khan's most famous quotes, "Fuck typhoons." Anyway, Ghost of Tsushima. Our bold protagonist Jin walks up a hill to where people are weeping over burial mounds, then rides off into the woods where he discovers some Mongols up to no good. You can tell they're Mongols and not regular bandits because, and props to Sucker Punch for historical detail here, they're wearing bright silk shirts under their traditional boiled leather armour. The idea was if an arrow penetrated your armour, the silk would wrap around the head of it as it went into your body. Not only would this protect the body from infection obviously, but it would then make it easier to remove the arrowhead. All you had to do was sort of just tug on your shirt a bit until it popped out. It would still hurt like buggery of course, but still infinitely preferable to either having to push it all the way through your arm or your leg, or hacking it out with a knife.
That ends our broadcast for the Open University, and that's all from BBC Two for tonight. Good night.
After dispatching this motley gaggle of invaders, Jin teams up with someone called Masako to rescue a monk from torture at a nearby temple. Cue a brief stealth segment with sneak attacks, pagoda climbing and a bit of nifty multi-kill action, culminating in a sudden betrayal from Masako and a visually striking one-on-one sword duel between her and Jin. In short, it's looking very pretty indeed. Whether Ghost of Tsushima will actually look precisely as pretty as this on release, or whether we'll see a Watch Dogs-esque graphical optimization before launch, remains to be seen. Regardless, I'm happy to see more samurai games in development. Incidentally, if anyone can recommend me a decent samurai game on PC, let me know in the comments below. Seeing this has given me a hankering to get my Bushido on. We then got treated to the sight of a banana playing an electric guitar, Made in Dreams, the upcoming creative sandbox affair from Little Big Planet creators Media Molecule. Some other similar little bits were used to separate the various presentations, yet Sony didn't give us any proper meaty look at Dreams in this conference. Somewhat of a wasted opportunity I felt, not least because I still haven't the foggiest idea of how it plays. No, these Made in Dreams bits were instead used as glorified partitions separating one game from another. And the game Sony chose to show after Ghost of Tsushima was a new title from Max Payne, Alan Wake and Quantum Break developers Remedy. Yeah! It's not Alan Wake 2. Oh. Nope, it's a brand new intellectual property, what's it called, Control, and what we saw of it here was sadly only a mere appetizer. All we could be certain of is the main character's a woman with a funky, throbbing cuboid gun, and she's inside a weird, ever-shifting cuboid building that may or may not be a US government facility. Like that sort of thing even matters in a place where the laws of physics clearly take regular unscheduled smoking breaks from time to time. All in all, it looks somewhat like an incestuous love child of Alan Wake and Quantum Break, part sci-fi and part horror. Up next was a game that's unabashedly horror as it was when it first came out on the original PlayStation back in 1998. Yep, like Resident Evil the first before it, Resident Evil 2 has received the Capcom Remaster treatment, and may I just say it looks bloody lovely. As well as lovely and bloody, of course. Frankly, I loved everything about this trailer, from presenting the first half of it entirely from the perspective of a common rat who sadly meets an unfortunate squishy end, to the subtle and not so subtle nods to the franchise's history, right up to the reveal of fan favourite Leon Kennedy, back when he was just a humble police officer dealing with a zombie outbreak in his small American city, and not some international action man rescuing the president's daughter from unruly Spanish bumpkins. And that's only the intro. Look at the rest of this trailer. See the obvious thought, care and attention that's gone into bringing a survival horror classic up to modern standards while still preserving its mood and tone. God, I'd smother someone with a pillow if that would get me Silent Hill remasters of this calibre. I'm so envious of you Resident Evil fans right now. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I'm genuinely happy for all you Resident Evil fans out there getting to play Resident Evil 2 again. Hey, bring on Resident Evil Nemesis Remastered next, eh? But seriously, I'm happy for you. You see it too, huh? For me, it's always like this. After that came a brief bit for Trevor Saves the Universe, another VR game from developers Squanch Games. Just Squanch Games now. Presumably for legal reasons, featuring the unmistakable vocals of Rick and Morty co-creator Justin Roiland, who voices both Rick and Morty in the show and VR game, as well as all the characters in this trailer. Unlike Rick and Morty VR, however, Trevor Saves the Universe can apparently also be played without strapping a whopping great bit of plastic onto your cranium. So that's good news for fans of Justin Roiland who don't share his frankly unfathomable obsession with VR. Seriously Justin, why are you so hot for VR? Has it got some dirt on you? Do you owe it money? Is it holding your loved ones hostage? I'm sure he has his reasons, and they'd probably still make far more sense to me than the ongoing story of Kingdom Hearts does. That's a segue. So yeah, more Kingdom Hearts, like what we saw at the Microsoft conference. To Square Enix's credit, they at least made sure to give Sony and Microsoft different trailers to show, although that didn't make this segment any less meh for me. Because as vaguely interesting as this Pirates of the Caribbean stuff looked, particularly the naval combat, I still had to endure these forgettable black-robed dickheads from Organisation 13, rambling on about hearts, darkness, destiny, shadows, more hearts, more darkness, 7 pure lights, and probably something about Xehanort. Frankly, I stopped paying a single shred of attention after all the pirate stuff. Fortunately, Hideo Kojima was on hand to snap me back to attention with a new trailer for Death Stranding, featuring explicit footage of Norman Reedus plugging himself into a baby in Iceland. Wow, I really just said that out loud, didn't I? I wasn't even trying to be snarky or flippant. That literally happens in this trailer.
I got an idea.
In all fairness, it might not actually be set in Iceland per se, but it sure looks a lot like pictures I've seen of it. A decent amount of this trailer consisted of pre-rendered scenes, because this is, after all, a Hideo Kojima trailer for a Hideo Kojima game. As well as the baby plugging, we're also treated to this rather wince-tastic moment where Norman Reedus rips off his big toenail, but the majority of this trailer was spent on cryptically conveying certain game and story elements. I have no idea what Timefall is, though I can hazard a guess, or what Doom could possibly be worse than an extinction factor, but I sure am bloody keen to find out. We also got introduced to 2 new characters, the first being this lady with retractable rubber shoulder spikes played by French actress Léa Seydoux, who carries around what looks like some kind of sensor array resembling a futuristic umbrella. I mean, it looks like a sensor array to me, but then it could just be a futuristic umbrella. That is when she's not eating whatever the hell this maggoty bug thing is. The second addition to the cast is none other than Lindsay Wagner. She's probably better known to most of you young'uns for her roles in NCIS, Grey's Anatomy or Warehouse 13. To me, however, she'll always be Jamie Summers, the Bionic Woman. You know, I never would have suspected Hideo Kojima of being a fan of the Bionic Woman. A show about a woman injured in a freak skydiving accident who has her legs, right arm and right ear replaced by cybernetics that let her run super fast and... yeah, on second thoughts it's pretty fucking obvious really. Interspersed with all that rather lovely CGI, however, was also a bunch of footage that might actually be in-engine gameplay, kinda, sorta, probably. Most of it is admittedly Norman Reedus, sporting different haircuts and outfits, trudging across an open plain, wading through water or climbing a hill. You can't really extrapolate much from it other than it might control a bit like Metal Gear Solid 5, but it is at least something tangibly mechanical. Hardly the most adrenaline pumping or action packed stuff admittedly, but then Kojima is clearly going for something a bit more Andrei Tarkovsky than say Michael Bay. Which is not to say there won't be some traditional gunplay, since this is blatantly a gun. I think. In short, Death Stranding looks set to be the most expensive art house science fiction movie ever in video game form, and I'm pretty excited to see how it pans out. I mean, it's clearly going to be a very personal game for Kojima, dealing with themes of human interconnectedness, environmentalism, and other profound subjects, while also perhaps being a teensy bit silly in places. After an all too brief reveal for Neo 2, I really should get round to playing the first one at some point, we came to the last of the big four games Sony were focusing on this evening, Marvel's Spider-Man, from Resistance and Sunset Overdrive developers Insomniac Games. Specifically a bit set on The Raft, which according to this Marvel wiki is a big floating prison for supervillains near Rikers Island in New York. As is tradition for Supermax prisons containing superpowered supervillains, there's a mass prison break in progress and Spidey has to go sort it out. As fine an opportunity as any to show off some more of the game's web traversal mechanics, which look very good indeed. My god, do they look good. Those, my friends, are the kinds of traversal mechanics you take home to meet your mother, or widowed aunt in this case. There was a good amount of combat too, which still looks very Batman Arkham series, but of course that's absolutely not a bad thing in the slightest, and Spidey at least livens things up with wisecracking and sarcasm.
What's your status?
Me? Just trapped in a prison with every criminal I've put away in the last 8 years. No biggie.
Sadly, wisecracks aren't very effective when you're getting the crap kicked out of you in a cutscene by Electro, Rhino, Vulture and Scorpion. And with that, the show was over. No farewell message from Father Sean Layden, no raising of lights, merely one last snippet of something made in dreams, and then a hard, almost jarring cut to the PlayStation logo. Well, not entirely. There was some kind of post-show stuff where they showed off a new From Software title, although it was a VR game, then started getting into some other stuff, as if the conference was still going on, albeit in a very reduced capacity. But I'd already decided to throw in the towel and call it a day. Which brings me to the main problem with this conference. The format. The format was rubbish. I don't want to bash Sony purely for trying to mix things up this year and doing something new, but this attempt can safely be filed in the circular cabinet labelled failures. While I'm sure it was really cool for everyone in the audience to see The Last of Us 2 in a replica church setting, the hundreds of thousands of people watching the show at home meanwhile had to sit through a naff little intermission that slowed the momentum of the conference the same way a brick wall slows the momentum of a speeding child. The only good thing I have to say about it is it only happened once. Sod knows how much worse it would have been if Sony had set up a different themed room for each of the 4 big games it was showcasing. Another point of contention I have is the between trailer segues promoting content made in dreams, but only because they were a tremendous missed opportunity. It's as if Sony were only casually tossing it in as a reminder that the game exists, even though plenty of people would have really appreciated an opportunity to see more of the game in action. Also, the Twitch stream going down right before the Ghost of Tsushima segment? You can't get more cack-handed and useless than that. How the hell does Sony with its gajillions of dollars and technical expertise fuck up what someone with a webcam and a copy of Fortnite can do in their sleep? Naturally, there's a world of difference between a giant corporate presentation in multiple conference venues and one person streaming a game, but they both end up on Twitch the same way. Finally, we have that abrupt ending which comes literally out of nowhere, but then almost immediately transitions to a post-show segment with various talking heads. Oh, and here's a new From Software game we could have shown you during the conference but didn't, possibly because it's VR only. My, aren't we so fucking bold and visionary? Look at us, we're mixing things up! The smaller games, meanwhile, like Resident Evil 2 Remastered, Control and Neo 2, on the other hand, were one of this conference's few saving graces and kept the whole thing from falling apart completely. They brought a sense of surprise and spontaneity to the proceedings that made it feel more lively and exciting, and without them the whole affair would have felt even more disjointed and wobbly. All in all, this conference was a prime example of Sony, thanks to its creeping complacency over the past few years, trying to be too clever for its own good. A wobbly mashup of justified confidence in the 4 killer looking exclusives they chose to focus on, married to excessive hubris stemming from their current market dominance. Building a conference around 4 strong pillars is all well and good, but you have to raise those pillars on a firm foundation. Alas, what Sony did this year was the conference equivalent of, to borrow a biblical metaphor, building a house on sand. And it's a crying goddamn shame, because the lineup of 4 games Sony chose to concentrate on this year was a powerful one. Any single one of them in any other year could have been E3 show stealers, yet the presentation that was supposed to support them hindered more than it helped. Of course, a game trailer should be able to hook you on its own merits, but even the Mona Lisa wouldn't look entirely as impressive as it does if it were nailed to the bedroom wall of a rundown trailer in the woods. Oh well. Better luck next year, eh, Sony? So with that out of the way, only the Nintendo conference remains, although I may very well end up doing a single video summarising all the other conferences, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment like that. Apologies by the way for the lateness of this video, a double whammy of a summer cold and the worst hay fever I've ever had in my entire life poured cold shit all over my productivity. Still, I'm feeling better now and back on track. Anyway, I hope you at least found this tolerable, and I look forward to you joining me next time. Meanwhile, until then, you can go now.